It's tomato planting day, one of the happiest gardening days of the year. I grew all of my tomatoes from seed this year, and it's finally time to put them in the ground. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I discuss everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. Today, I'll cover my tomatoes, from seed to garden. It's been about 4 months since I got this package of Black Krim tomato seeds from Seed Savers Exchange. What makes this seed special is this is the one I chose to grow as part of the single seed challenge, which you may have seen on other videos. And this is just one of the Black Krim tomato plants that came from these seeds. Today, I'm putting this plant and many others behind me into this bed that's specially prepared for my tomatoes. It was about 6 weeks ago that I started these seeds inside underneath lights. Now, I began the process by taking a regular flat of 72 cells and filling it with a seed starter mix of my own recipe. And then on top of this mix, I placed 2 to 3 seeds in each cell. Now, not all of the seeds were Black Krim. I'm growing a lot of different varieties. And with all the seeds laid out on this flat, I just took a stick and pressed the seeds into the seed starter mix, about 1/4 inch deep, and then lightly covered them. The seed starter mix was nice and moist to start, but after putting the seeds in place, I took a water bottle filled with just regular water and spritzed the surface so that the surface was nice and moist as well. And then I covered it with a plastic top and put the entire flat underneath some lights. I have other videos that show each of these steps much more in depth. After the seeds germinated, I kept the plastic dome on until they grew about 1.5 inches high and began developing their true leaves. When deciding on the right time to start transplanting these seedlings, I'm looking for the true leaves to start developing. These are the leaves that are at the top of the plant, and they're different than the initial leaves, the cotyledon leaves. I'm adding some of my worm castings to my planting mix, using about half as much of the castings as I use of the compost. So I'm using both compost and worm castings in my mix. I start by removing these small seedlings from the cell, and I like using a tongue depressor to take the whole thing out. And you can see that there's already some really good root development in these very small seedlings. I'm using a moist potting soil, and I have about half of this little pot filled with soil. I have 2 plants here. I'm going to go ahead and separate them at this point. And it's just a gentle tug at the very bottom. I'm not squeezing the stems at all. I'm just grabbing soil and pulling the roots apart. And this is the stronger of these 2. So this is the one I'm going to use for my single seed challenge. So I take this half-filled pot and just lay the plant inside it. And then I'll add some more of the potting mix and then firm it gently around the small plant. Add a little bit more, and I'm burying the stem about an extra inch deep at this point, and roots will develop along this stem. And so now I have a plant tag marked with a straw for this special one, and this is ready to grow until I transplant it again. I watered in all these little seedlings, and then the very next thing I do is put them underneath the lights. It's pretty easy to keep these plants watered. I always water from the bottom and just pour it in and then let the roots soak it up. Today I'm going to pot up some of these tomatoes that I started from seed. They're all about 6 to 8 inches tall, and some of the roots are starting to grow out of the bottom. That's a really good indication that it's time to transplant. I could leave them in these pots, but then they'll become root bound and their growth will be stunted. But if I put them into a bigger pot, they're going to grow much bigger and develop a much more extensive root system so that when I put them outside, I should have a much bigger and stronger plant in the long run. Transplanting these tomatoes into a deeper and bigger pot is easy. I have my potting soil right here, and this is my own mix. And I just take the plant, I'll put my fingers around the stem and just remove the pot, saving the plant tag. And at this point, I like to go ahead and pinch off these very first leaves, the cotyledon leaves. And so this pot that has a little bit of soil in the bottom of it is perfect for me to just lay the tomato in. Now I will press it into the pot to push that soil that was in a little bit deeper, add more. Now because I'm going from a round pot to a square pot, I will push the soil in around the corners. But I just continue adding the potting soil until it's just slightly below the top of the pot. Put the plant tag in, and this is all ready to go. Once you figure this out, it goes pretty quickly. Here's the tomato that I'm growing for the single seed challenge. Process is exactly the same. Pinch off the cotyledon leaves, take the pot out, and you can see how extensive the root system is just from being in this little pot. By transferring it to the bigger pot, I'm really giving these roots an opportunity to grow into much more soil. Set it in, push it down, add some more of the potting soil around the edges, push down the corners. Put the plant tag in, and here's another one all ready to go. With all the plants in their pots, now it's time to just water them in. Now, the potting soil was moist. The plants were in moist soil, so it doesn't take much water. This is just to get the surface to settle down and get full contact with the roots. So just a little bit of water in each of these pots. And now I'm putting this tray back under the lights, but because these pots are higher, I'm going to have to raise my light a little bit. Always trying to keep the light a couple inches above the plants. That gives them the best growth, the sturdiest stems, and as you can see, they're all looking very healthy. I like these tall, thin pots because I can put the same number of pots in one of these trays as when I was using the smaller. Now, because I did have multiple plants, I had to get another tray for that excess. But for the most part, if you're just doing one small pot to one big pot, these slender ones work great. These tomatoes have been hardening off for a couple weeks now. They are more than ready to go in the ground. All of the tomato plants in this bed are indeterminate tomatoes, which means they'll grow nice and tall. So I set up this cattle panel trellis. I used 8-foot long T-posts at the ends and in the middle, and then strung up the cattle panel. The total height is just over 6 feet. So that's how tall these tomatoes are going to grow. It's important to put a trellis like this in place before you plant so that you don't disturb any of those transplants to set it up. I like to lay out all of my plants in the location where I'm going to put them in the ground. I've spaced these about 18 inches apart, staggered. So there'll be a plant on this side, and then 18 inches distant, there'll be a plant on the other side. And so they'll be staggered from one side to the other, but they're all going to be growing up the same trellis. That'll help ensure that as the sun moves across the sky, the plants on this side will get the full morning sun, the plants on that side will get the full afternoon sun, and then they'll all get the sun when it's directly overhead. The soil is nice and moist. I've had this straw mulch on it for weeks. And all I'm going to do now is just dig a hole deep to transplant the tomatoes. And I like to go deep because tomatoes will grow roots all the way along the stem. Anything that's buried will turn into more roots, and more roots means a stronger plant. Stronger plant, more flowers and fruit, which is what we all want. I'll start with a Paul Robeson. I've removed the lower leaves, and then I'll put it into the hole, and it's going to end up being about 3 to 4 inches deeper than it was growing in the pot. And then I just fill this hole in with the soil, put the plant tag, and cover it with the mulch. I do the same process with all of the other plants, and it moves pretty quickly. I have all of the plants in the ground now except for the special one, the Black Krim for the Single Seed Challenge. Now, I want to thank Scott Head from the Black Gumbo channel. He's the one that issued the Single Seed Challenge, and I've seen a number of videos from gardeners of all skill levels making videos about the Single Seed Challenge, where they chose a single seed, started it, and then reached the point, like I am, where they're growing it in their garden. I love Black Krim. That's why I chose it for the Single Seed Challenge. But it's also a pretty distinctive tomato, so it makes it real easy to identify on the plant. And then when you taste it, there's few other tomatoes that taste so good. So, this whole bed is planted. My Black Krim for the Single Seed Challenge is in place. Now I'm going to add a little bit extra mulch. I like a nice layer of straw mulch, and I'll put it on a couple inches thick. And then after it's in place, I'll water it very well. That'll help it settle and stay in place a little bit better. The process of choosing the seed, getting all the materials to start it inside, and then get it into your garden is about 2 months long, but it's well worth that time. I'll continue to track the progress of this Black Krim and all the rest of my tomatoes in another video, so be sure and look forward to that. And if you have any questions about the process so far, by all means, let me know below. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and share it. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.